Hello, my name is Brian of Hessens County, and I'm glad that you could join us again today for another TTRPG Talk. This series discusses tabletop role-playing games and related materials, takes a look at some of my own materials, and makes some suggestions that you might be able to utilize for your own creations or home games. Today we're going to be continuing our SRD series, taking a look at the 24XX SRD that was created by Jason Tocci, the creator of the original 2400 series of sci-fi micro TTRPGs. Taking a little look at the sort of like the philosophy behind this game, the original game describes itself as a lo-fi sci-fi. While this was likely intended to describe the genre of low-budget or small-scale sci-fi movies with impactful but less epic, more lower-scale storytelling being emulated, I personally think that this can also pretty well describe the sort of simple, modular, and loose mechanics that run 24XX in contrast to a lot of the sort of more crunchy sci-fi games that you might be familiar with, like the adaptations to Star Trek and Star Wars, Corollas, Cyberpunk, Traveler, things like that. The basic mechanics, therefore, based on the explanation in the SRD, they seem to, at least to me, they seem to focus less on success and more on how badly your character is impacted by the risks that they're taking. Like in a lot of games, polyhedral dice resolve your actions. Normally, only one die is rolled, although if your character is being helped, either by outside circumstances or by another character, you might end up rolling 2 dice and then sort of using whichever result is better. While the die itself can vary depending upon your skill level, or if your character is being hindered, anywhere from a d4 to a d12, with the d6 being the sort of unskilled default. You are always going to be rolling against the same results table. A 1 or a 2 means that you suffer the full consequences of whatever risk it was that you were taking. A 3 or a 4 means that your character experiences a setback. So most likely you would be achieving some form of like partial success or success with consequences. A 5 or better is a full success, or in other words, basically you're suffering no consequences or risk, negative effects of the risk you were taking, with even higher results, even higher number results being encouraged, if possible, to emulate some form of like even better. So instead of just being a yes, you do it, it was more like a yes and, let's say. I do, however, want to clarify that the SRD does actually mention that if you roll a 1 or 2, this admittedly does not automatically mean that you fail. Rather, instead, as I mentioned, is experiencing the full punishment, the full risk of the full outcome of whatever risk that they were taking. Or in other words, you might succeed in getting what you want, but in the end, you came out behind, is basically the ultimate idea behind sort of rolling that 1 or that 2. So I think in that case, it would really be between like the player and the person running the game, and sort of the group at the table, and how you all want to spin this particular situation. The original 24X games utilize also a speciality and an origin in order to provide a sort of character customization that is still simple through basically these templates of special abilities and traits, items, or skills that altogether equal roughly about 6 skill levels or credits worth of items. Specialities do take the place of classes. So, for example, the face in the original game was skilled at reading people and deception and got an extensive disguise wardrobe. The tech was a person who was skilled in hacking and electronics, and also got some repaired tools to go along with their custom computer. So as you can see here, oftentimes a lot of, at least in the original game, the specialities got 2 skill upgrades and a thing that kind of helped them explain the connection between them and the role that they have been taking in life up to this point. Origins were basically basically the equivalent of like a race or a form or an ancestry in a lot of other RPGs. Oftentimes, this is where you'll end up getting special abilities. Although sometimes you might be getting skills or items depending upon specifically which origin it is or how you design it to kind of um, encourage at least a rough balance between characters. So, for example, in the original game, the human got 3 skill upgrades that they could distribute however they wished because, of course, they didn't have any real special abilities and traits. Because aliens got 2 special traits that they could then use to make actions easier, or maybe basically give them a built-in sort of gear, essentially. So an example of built-in gear might be wings, or an example of a thing making actions easier is maybe your species is good at mimicry for disguising, or you have natural camouflage, or something along those lines. Character advancement is generally intended to come at the end of each job or mission, so there isn't really a sort of like experience points system here. Instead, it's basically everybody just upgrades. This reward in the default will usually take the form of 1d6 credits that can be used on purchasing new gear or major cost items that the party might need to invest in, like spending money on buying things for like a collective ship or some collective piece of property like an estate or something, depending upon what version of game you're creating with this, whether it's a sci-fi or fantasy or something else. In addition, your character would be getting an upgrade to a single skill, one step up that polyhedral dice ladder, or being allowed to basically purchase a new skill. Going from the unskilled D6 to a D8, D10, and then full mastery of a skill at D12. There are no explicit safety rules technically spelled out in the SRD. Like, no, there is no like safety system that's really said, here's something you can use, here's how it works, da 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 da. Right? There is no elaborate explanation of that, admittedly, because there is a limited amount of space. It does mention, however, potentially using like fast forwarding, pausing, and rewinding. Again, a reference back to movies. Not only for safety reasons, but also to sort of try to help the pacing of play and keeping players engaged and stuff like that. If you're creating your own game using this system, obviously I would definitely encourage you at the very least include that text, if not potentially adapting your own little system depending upon however you prefer to utilize safety rules at your own table. Creators using the SRD are also encouraged to include a whole page of rolling tables that can be tailored to various different elements of your theme, like providing support for character creation, creating scenes and settings for scenes, mission creation, as well as providing some as well as through those tables, sort of providing a basic feeling and explanation of the themes beyond whatever else information you might have put, like in your title images or the summary explanation that you might have included, like on your store page or whatever. The 2400 SRD is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license. So again, just like a lot of other ones, you can definitely create with this and commercialize your product so long as you include some attribution to Jason Tocci and the original sort of 24XX SRD system. Its modular mechanics and when the original SRD actually came out have definitely contributed to this being a relatively popular SRD for adaptation. Many of the games that have been created using the 24XX SRD do utilize a similar style of presentation. A lot of them are built around a sort of micro-zine, or I have occasionally seen like 3-column pamphlet formats for this game, partly to make it small and simple, and then also just to sort of play into the sort of that lo-fi sort of experience. Another reason for this is because Jason Tocci and a lot of other creators have created a number of different templates with the basic idea of making development of these games quicker and easier. For example, there are templates for Google Slides, Google Doc, Affinity Publisher, and Adobe InDesign. Additionally, the PDF version of the system guide can also act as a layout reference document. And there are links to various resources that might be useful for a creator, like links to the original fonts used, and also links to potential images that might be commercially available. There is a logo for recognition of 24xx based games that is provided through the itch store page for this SRD. A lot of the games that are built on this system also typically play around with the sort of 24xx or 2400 motif. With their titles. So, for example, you have 2412, Christmas Eve Job by Calvin Jones, and there's actually several that utilize the games that were released as part of a jam that used that sort of 2412 or 1224 or that sort of numbering and for a Christmas game. There's also the 18xx series of games that were released by Diego Barreto of Deep Light Games. And also another example is Doomsday 10XX by Aaron King. That's set during, basically you're attempting to repel the Norman invasion. So it's a reference to 1066. It is important to note, since I'm discussing sort of people playing around with motifs and titles, that it's generally discouraged that you utilize the number 2400 explicitly in your title. This is mainly because, of course, Jason Tocci, as I mentioned, has a series of games that are where the title is always themed being 2400, and then there's a name or word. And of course, we don't want to create confusion. So it's generally discouraged that you not utilize the explicit number 2400 in your title. So use some other number or the 24xx or some other sort of reference to clearly point out that this is not a Jason Tocci game. That's not part of that series. There is definitely an active support system and community for this game. There is a forum on the itch store page for the 24xx SRD. There are multiple discords which have links on the itch store page as well. If I get a chance, I will also include some of them in the description down below. There are translations of the core documents. I know for sure that there are translations in Italian, French, and Portuguese. I don't know if it's like continental or Brazilian Portuguese, but I'm sure there's probably at least one or two other translations of the system out there that just I'm not aware of. And that's pretty much the basics for the 24xx SRD. As usual, links to various and sundry things will be found in the doobly-doo down below. I will definitely be including links, obviously, to the itch store, potentially to some of the other resources that are linked on the itch store, like community sources and things like that. I will also be including a link to its page on the I don't remember if this one is on the Foddy IPG website, but if it is, I will include a link to that as well. And yeah, this is definitely a sort of, again, another sort of light system that you definitely could adapt. Again, it was originally created with the idea of adapting sort of low fidelity sci-fi, but you definitely could utilize it for other systems, and it has been for high fantasy, low fantasy, sort of historical adaptation dramas. You could use it for a lot of different things. And I highly encourage that you at least consider experimenting with it. Thank you again for joining us today. Get out there, create, and don't forget to rate your itch purchases. If you'd like to see more material on this topic, please feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel or check out the blog at hessenscounty.com.